Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second season of Around the Campfire. I'm Jaimie Somlai, Marketing Director at Northwoods, and your Around the Campfire host. Today, I'm joined by Katelyn Goerke, UX Research Lead, and she and I are going to talk about the value of combining UX and brand strategy research, particularly when you're considering a website redesign. But before we dive in, one of the hallmarks of our podcast has been to start each episode with a bit of personal trivia about our guests. So, with a brand new year just beginning, I'm curious, Katelyn, did you make any New Year's resolutions that you are willing to share?
Yeah, I am trying to read more. I feel like this is my
That's a good
resolution
one.
every year, but I think it's going to happen this year. I fell out of reading when I was in grad school and having to read crazy technical things all the
Yeah,
time. But I started a book club with a couple of friends this year, so we're going to keep
fun.
ourselves accountable and try and get us to read more books and talk about them. So
That's
hopefully
awesome.
that'll start the year off right.
Yeah, for
What
sure,
about
for
you?
sure. Yeah, mine is so I started doing bar workouts in July of last
Ooh.
year, and I have completely fallen in love with them. My goal is to do 12 to 15 a month for 2025.
Wow.
So, yes,
That's cool.
I've been doing 15. I've been averaging 15 for the past couple months. I'm like, well, see if I can do 12 to 15. I'm cutting it back a little because as I'm getting older, I'm finding I'm very sore after doing a lot of these. So I need a little bit more time to rest in between. But yes, so that's my goal for the year. So we will see. So we have
That's
good
fun.
goals. That's really
We have
good.
good goals. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to touch base in December of next year and like, did we actually
Did
do
we
it?
do this? Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
Well, I guess to start, we should probably define what we mean by UX and what we mean by brand strategy as a baseline. So I'll let you kind of dive in and talk a little bit about what UX research means, and then I'll jump in with brand strategy.
yeah. So UX, I guess place to start with that is that it stands for user experience. And it's sort of everything that encompasses how you look at and improve the experience for someone visiting your website or using your app or whatever it is that you're improving the user experience of. Research, as a kind of starting point for user research, is basically the process of gathering data that'll help you to improve that user experience. So on a website, that's something like looking at your Google Analytics or other traffic data that you might have, looking at heat maps that show where people are clicking on different pages. Basically, it's the process of gathering data that you can then use to help make recommendations and improve the user experience that someone's having on your site based on that data. So making sure that when people come to your website, use your app, whatever it is that we're looking at, that they are able to do what they need to do and that they are finding the things that you want them to find. And what data can we gather to make sure that's happening? Or to, if it's not happening, to help improve it in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great definition. And so I'll jump in with brand strategy. So just a brief definition of brand strategy, it's really all about understanding the needs of your customers, just like UX is really. The understanding current brand perception, how to position your brand authentically to more effectively meet your customer needs and compete in the market to achieve your long-term business goals. Good brand strategy is really built on a significant amount of research, which sometimes surprises people, but that research really gives you that 360-degree view of your brand from all different stakeholders. So you can really clearly understand the unique value that you bring to the market, coupled with how your business plans to compete. So that's really all about business strategy, your mission, your vision, your overarching business goals. So brand strategy really flows from that business strategy and then becomes the foundation of marketing strategy. So I guess a simple way to put it is that brand strategy is really just how you position your organization in the market and the minds of your customers. It's a critical business endeavor that really touches all aspects of your business. So it's something that all businesses should definitely take a look at if they haven't already and re-look at it every couple of years. So
For sure.
perfect. Well, you and I have worked very closely together on a couple of different brand strategy and UX projects, particularly when organizations are looking to both rebrand and also redesign their website. So, from your perspective, what has been the biggest benefit of combining both the UX and the brand strategy work?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit is that both of them start the same. It's all about research. It's all about gathering information about what users are doing, what they need, and then we just use that research very differently. So I think there's a massive time saving, cost saving on the part of the company doing that research, because if you're already planning on going through both processes, why not do the research at the same time? So I think there's a real basic benefit in just we're doing a lot of the same research, but using it slightly differently or asking just slightly different questions. So I think that is probably one of the bigger benefits. I think there's also a benefit in the fact that we can work together. And oftentimes, a recommendation you make might contribute to a recommendation I make, and vice versa. And so I think that there's a nice benefit there as well.
Yes, I completely agree with you on that. Plus, it's kind of interesting to see how the brand strategy results can impact your UX recommendations. Like particularly one that stands out to me is, IA recommendations too. Sometimes there might be a section of a site that we would never even think about adding had we not done the brand strategy work. So which is, so one example that comes to mind is PowerBrace. When we worked with them on their brand strategy and UX, we ultimately ended up really wanting to focus on the expertise of their team and the experience that they provide. And they didn't have a team section of their site. It's probably not something we would have recommended adding had we not gone through the brand strategy work. So that's a great example of how the two kind of come together as well too.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a good example too of like we're having the same types of conversations with people, but we're asking slightly different questions. And so it's a good example of, you're asking questions that I wouldn't necessarily ask, but the results that you're getting and the answers you're getting are going to influence the end product of the recommendations I make, and vice versa. So it's just interesting. It leads to a better end product. And I think with that PowerBrace example as well, I think it's a good example too of, data that we found in the brand portion of the project that then we add to the, sitemap and overall structure. But then those recommendations also might influence the calls to action that we have on the website, the content we have on the website, which is all part of the things that I would look at as part of a UX project. So, having both of us in those conversations, hearing that, it can be, your recommendation is to, incorporate the team more. Mine then is like, all right, let's add a page. Let's add links to that page. Let's look at how that overall improves the experience of someone visiting the website. So they really do work together in a lot of ways.
They do. And I'm curious, I mean, I brought up PowerBrace, which is probably one of my favorite projects, but do you have a favorite project that we've worked on together when it comes to UX brand strategy? Or is PowerBrace yours as well?
It's probably PowerBrace. I think it was kind of the perfect example of it just kind of meshing together really well. And, things that I'm finding that then you could incorporate into your results. And I think it was just kind of the perfect mesh.
It really was.
It really was. I mean, not that it hasn't worked on other projects as well, but I think that one just was an example of it just working incredibly well.
I completely agree. It is definitely my favorite. So just to explain what PowerBrace does, I guess, because our audience probably doesn't know, but they manufacture trailer swing door securement products, essentially. So when you're driving down the highway and you see those big semi trailers on the highway, and on the back they have those really long metal rods that are keeping those doors shut, that's what they manufacture. So they originally came to us because they had a really outdated website. And we ultimately ended up doing, like Katelyn had talked about, the brand strategy and the UX work together because they needed brand strategy desperately in terms of just understanding how to message and position themselves in the market. So we ultimately were able to do both pieces of work with them together. And even though they came to us wanting that website originally, it's like, well, we can go deeper than that. We can help you guys, with your overarching brand strategy as well. So yeah, that was, I think, a great project and a good example with the addition of the team section as to how brand strategy can really influence the UX work that you do, and rewriting all of the content into your point calls to action, and just everything really streamed from their business strategy down to the brand strategy we developed down to the UX. And just
Yeah.
meshed really, really well together. So,
Yeah, I think another
yeah.
example from the project I could think of is one thing that we found on the UX side through our data was that the products organization wasn't working.
Oh,
We
yes,
had
right.
recordings of people clicking through the site trying to click on certain pages that weren't linked, or they were trying to get to things. Clearly, we're getting frustrated through these recordings. And so for us, it was like, okay, we need to reorganize this. This clearly isn't working the way it's built right now. But
Right.
having some of those brand insights allowed us to say, okay, well, what are the other things that we can incorporate into these pages to not only get people to the content they want, but to also reinforce that brand? And so it was a great way to say, okay, as we're rebuilding this structure, as we're rewriting content even for these pages, let's take into this new brand messaging that you've developed and let's incorporate it through that content. So we're both looking at it from an SEO perspective, making sure that these pages can rank on search engines, but we're also looking at, okay, what is the brand perception we want them to have when they're looking at these
Right.
products? We want them to get
Right.
to the products they're looking for. We want it to rank in Google, and we want them to understand who PowerBrace is as a company and this brand that we're building. So I
Yeah.
think it's another example of how if you really have both parts from the very beginning, you end up not only saving time in the process, but also making a better end product because you can look at things holistically from all these different perspectives as you're redoing things to make it work from every
Yeah.
aspect that you need a website to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's really well put. I think one of the questions too we get from sometimes from customers is, can I do a website redesign without a brand strategy? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. If your brand strategy is solid, you haven't undergone a major change in your business, such as a merger, acquisition, or you haven't had major product or service changes, you're still authentically positioned in the market. You don't necessarily need to redo your brand strategy, but we do always recommend UX research with a website redesign. So that is something that we do recommend, but you definitely do not have to do brand strategy with a website redesign. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there, Katelyn.
I would just say we get the same question on the UX side is, do I have to do UX research for building a website? And
Yeah.
my answer is sort of the opposite. I would say you need to at least verify that your UX is working. And I would say if you're doing a website redesign, you definitely should be at least looking at your UX from data for a little bit, making sure that, you're able to confirm that things are working, not that you keep building the same thing that isn't working. The other thing I would say is if you are going through a brand project as part of a website redesign, you definitely should also look at your UX because inevitably some of those brand recommendations are going to impact the UX of the site. So I would say
Absolutely.
if you are going through a change and you're needing to look at your brand, look at your UX as well because inevitably something's going to get out of whack or you're going to want to make some changes either based on the
Yes.
data that you're gathering or just to better fit that brand that you're developing.
Right, right, exactly. Even down to sometimes things like, menu labeling. There
Yeah.
might be certain words that make sense from a brand perspective that you want to consider on the UX side that underscore the personality that you're developing and the voice of the brand that you want to bring to life. Things as simple as, should your blog be called Industry Insight? Should it be called something just simple things like that that actually do have quite a bit of thought behind them. So,
And I would say kind of combined with that is making sure that, I think there's sometimes this perception that like brand and SEO don't always work together, and that's completely
yeah.
not true. But I
Yeah.
think you always want to make sure that, you're thinking of keywords and making sure things that, rank well and things like that. But again, it's just a matter of
Mhm.
doing the research. And
Right.
maybe on the brand side, you're debating between a couple different titles. You can do some research on the SEO side to
Oh.
see, well, is one of those words better for my website from a web perspective? Well, that might help you decide between the different brand options you've got. So I think it's
Yes.
a matter of just doing the holistic research, making sure that you've got a full picture of what's going on and using that to make a site that works from your new brand perspective as well as from an SEO and from a user experience perspective as well.
Absolutely. Great point. Is there anything else that you want to share in particular about UX research, the importance of it? I mean, you've talked about that already, but is there anything additional that you want to add?
I would say the last thing, I think I haven't touched on it as much, is that I think the reason why these two share so much is because they all start with the user. And while you're benefiting the business at the end of the day, I think a lot of the work we do on, especially the UX side, but definitely also on the brand side, is understanding what the user needs from the business and not just putting the business's needs on the site alone. I think a lot of the times when we're making recommendations for both these projects, it's a lot of, this is how you talk about it. This is what's best for your users. And so I think that's why these work so well
100%.
together, is we're putting your users first. And while we're keeping in mind what your business needs, we want to make sure that the people coming to your site are able to do what they need to do first of all. Because if
Yes.
you're not meeting the needs that they have to your site, it doesn't really matter what you want to do because they're not going to listen. So I think that's why these two work so well together, is that we're both looking at things from a user perspective and what they need from you at
Yes.
the end of the day.
1,000%. Mic drop right there. It's all about the user, which I think is, kind of, I'll get on my brand strategy soapbox for a second, because I think it's one of the biggest misconceptions about brand strategy is that companies think they own their brand. And really, you don't. A brand is a perception, and your customers and the general public really own that perception. You can influence that perception through your brand identity, through the experience that you deliver, but your customers really own the perception of your brand. So it's really kind of what they think of when there's this quote, and I don't know who said it, but somebody said, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that's exactly the essence of brand. So it's really about the perception of the brand that you can influence. You as a brand can influence. You can influence the touch points. You can influence all the interactions that a customer has with you. Some may be great, some may not be great, but you can try to engineer that experience to positively influence brand perception. A great example of that is Target. I'm a frequent shopper at Target. Their visual brand identity has remained pretty consistent over the years, little tweaks here and there, but they've got that signature red color. They've got the logo has remained pretty much the same with some minor tweaks. Their personality, kind of fun and trendy. So when you see an ad for them, TV, display, otherwise, you kind of generally know right away it's Target. So that is an example of Target owning their brand identity and trying to purposefully influence that perception. But as a customer, my perception of Target as a brand has kind of evolved over the years. So from one of being kind of, a fun and innovative shopping experience with high quality, kind of lower cost, trendy items and clothing and all that kind of stuff, to one of a little bit maybe more reduced quality, longer checkout times, and issues with kind of items not being in stock. That all leads to my brand perception of Target. And collectively, if a lot of customers have that same brand perception, then that overall is kind of a decline in brand perception for Target. But they can obviously influence that through their advertising, their brand identity, their experience that they delivered. It can be engineered to provide a better experience. So I guess the biggest thing is it's not just about brand identity. And a lot of organizations mistake brand strategy for a brand identity. And they think that if I just tweak my logo and I change my color palettes and I change my fonts, that's good. We're good. And it's not just about that. It's about the entire customer experience over a period of time. So you really need to engineer that brand experience in every way possible across every aspect of your business, which is why brand strategy is so important, because your brand identity should ladder directly from that brand strategy. And so it's not just about your colors and your fonts, but if you know what your brand strategy is in that position in the market that you want to pursue, then that will influence that brand identity and ultimately what customers see. And it can produce a positive impact on customer perception. But the other thing, I guess I continue on my soapbox here, is that brand strategy is not easy. It is, and again, I think that's why a lot of companies confuse brand identity and brand strategy, because brand strategy takes a lot of time and research. Again, going back to understanding what your customer's perception of your brand is. What are you doing well? What are you not doing well? And really understanding the competition as well. What are your competitors doing in the market? How are they positioning in the market? That takes a ton of that, coupled with your business goals and where you want to go as a business, ultimately crafts that brand strategy to guide your company long term. So, what is your brand essence? What is your promise to your customers? How are you positioning in the market? Are you positioned on price? Are you positioned on quality? Are you positioned on service? Are you positioned on that experience? How you position influences everything else that you do as an organization, or in theory, it should. So it's not just about changing your fonts and colors. It is a really time-consuming process, because you've got to talk to customers, you've got to talk to employees, you've got to talk to partners, suppliers, donors, board members, anybody that significantly impacts your business, to really understand, again, what you're doing well and where you can improve. And getting that 360-degree view is so critical, because it does shine a light on what makes your business unique and where you can position and brand yourself uniquely in the market to influence that brand perception. So yeah, diving right into design, or thinking that brand strategy is brand identity work and the visual elements of that, really shortchanges your ability to make long-term impact as a business. So you do have to take the time, and it does take time. Sorry to tell you guys, it does take some time to do all of that research. And I know I totally get it, because I've been on the client side. I'm really impatient. When you want to change something, or you want to do something better, you just want to do it now. And so being able to kind of step back and take 6 months, 9 months, whatever it's going to take, to really understand your brand and where you are and where you want to go. It's so hard to wait, but ultimately you cannot skip that research if you want to be successful long term. So
yeah, and the one thing I'll add on to that I think applies to both of ours is that I think the reason why that taking the time to do the research is so important, and the why, we always kind of go back to that user need, is that I feel like on both sides, both on the UX and brand side, there's a lot of assumption of, well, we just know what they need. We know we know our customers. We know what they need from us. And I think that's where the biggest issues always come in, is that thought of, I know what the problem is. Because I can tell you from my many years of talking to users, and I'm sure Jaimie's shaking her head, she's done the same. There's always something you don't know. There's always something that comes out through these conversations, through this research that we're doing, that is unexpected in some way. Even if you know that something's wrong. Well, often on the website side, come in and people will say, well, I know that the website isn't built well, or I know that there's this problem with this part of the website. And sometimes we'll come in and say, yeah, that's true, but here's this other data we have now to help us fix it. Or it'll be, actually, that's fine. What we need to do is focus on this. And that happens all the time. So it's important of taking the time to do that research, is to make sure that from a brand perspective, from a UX perspective, that you're not just working on assumption, you're working on data. You're working on things that you know are true. Because in the end of the day, taking the time to do that research is going to make sure that you aren't wasting your time and money and effort down the road doing the wrong thing. So taking the time, talking to users, learning about your brand, learning about your UX, I think taking the time to do it right is going to make sure that you're set off on the right foot going forward as well.
That's such a great point, because doing it wrong is so easy. It's the easy way to go.
Yeah.
It's using those internal assumptions and going forward without doing the research. And to your point, it really can cost you long term, because ultimately, when you realize a couple years down the road you've been on the wrong path, you're going to have to redo it all anyway and start from scratch. So it is better to just start out of the gate. Yes, have the patience to do the research. And it can be really fun too, to do the research and really understand, how your customers are seeing not just the website and your digital assets, but the perception of that brand overall. It's very, very interesting and enlightening. So, because it is very tempting to just kind of take our organizational perceptions and structure and just go with that. but not typically the best way to
Yeah.
approach it. So
Yeah.
awesome. Anything else that you want to add from the UX side or
I
okay.
don't think so. I think we've covered
Yeah.
the bulk of it. I mean,
I
we've
think
covered what
so
we can.
too. We covered what
For
we
today, at
can
least.
without going really far down into rabbit holes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me to talk all about UX and brand, the kind of dynamic duo as we think of it. And this is definitely one of our favorite topics to discuss. So, and thank you for
Yeah.
everyone for tuning in for this inaugural episode of our second season of Around the Campfire. If you do want to catch up on previous episodes, visit our podcast playlist on YouTube, or you can visit our website at nwsdigital.com/around the campfire. We also have a best of 2024 episode available if that is of interest to you. So check that out. So happy New Year to everyone. And thanks again for tuning in. And we will see you around the campfire again very soon.